Ladies and gentlemen, recorded in Fredericton, New Brunswick, Canada, it's time for the Fight Night Picks podcast with your host, Craig.
And Matt.
Alan.
Boom! And look at that. We are back and we are live again with Fight Night Picks. We're in the same room. This isn't Skype.
Nice.
I mean, you felt that. This is real.
Barely, but...
No, but realistically, really excited to be back and live and in person with Fight Night Picks this week in MMA. Matt, this week we have a lot to talk about. We had a big announcement today from ESPN and the UFC. The fact that we have 3 cards coming up in the span of 8 days from the Memorial Veterans Arena, if I'm not mistaken, that's the name, in Jacksonville, Florida. So right at that Florida-Georgia line. Everybody getting excited about MMA. Let us know what you're thinking about that in the comments as well. You can always find us on Twitter and Instagram at CraigAllenFNP, at MattAllenFNP, and at Fight Night Picks. Now, Matt, I'm excited because, listen, I know there's a lot of people out there that have been slagging the MMA media, feeling like MMA media doesn't actually like the sport. I will tell you this, I'm excited to have MMA back. MMA Picks is with us. Hey, how's it going? We are excited. Reason why we're back together again in person, the fact that the government of New Brunswick and Canada decided to loosen some of the restrictions. And it seems like a swingers mentality because 2 families are the only people that can see each other, and you can only go see that one family. So maybe there's a swinger high up in provincial politics that allowed that to happen. But listen, we couldn't be more excited to be here and talking MMA. And like I said, Matt, UFC 249, we actually get a card coming up on May the 9th. I pulled up the poster. There's only the one poster so far for UFC 249. You're probably going to get a new rollout because if you can see it on there, not just the fact that it's April the 18th, the date, but also the co-main event on that originally planned card, not going to be taking place as scheduled. So kind of fill us in a little bit on that one.
We get a way better co-main event. And it's Dominic Cruz versus Henry Cejudo. If you're not more excited about that fight than you were about Jessica Andrade versus Namajunas, something's wrong with you. Because I know Dominic Cruz has been out for a really long time, but if there's any one athlete in the sport who's kind of proven that they can get over ring rust and make it not much of an issue, it would be Dominic Cruz. And just him having that really bad loss to Cody Garbrandt, taking all this time, he's had quite a bit of injuries, but he's been working for the UFC a lot. He's still been training quite a bit too, so it's not like he's been out of the sport per se. He's still been very much involved in the sport. So I see Dominic Cruz having all this time off and then coming back, much more like when GSP did it against Bisping, and again, very much like he did against TJ Dillashaw after the Mizugaki win. But I think it's an interesting matchup. I know Henry Cejudo is not really fighting the top 4 guys, which is unfortunate, but if you look at the rest of that division, who would you like to see him fight just for, money fights or super fights, if you will? The Dominic Cruz fight is a really fun one.
Yeah, and I mean, realistically, for me, I selfishly want to see Cruz wait it out a little bit longer, wait it out till next year, and then fight TJ Dillashaw again. That'd be my fight. But still, the fact that we get such a good title fight like that in our co-main event, I know, in the interim, there were rumors, the fact that we might get a fight between Amanda Nunes and Felicia Spencer, that fight's off. So you're going to have 2 title fights on this card as long as everything goes to plan. And of course, sports considered an essential service in the state of Florida. So we're going to get these fights coming up. Now,
this is what I really like. When fighters fight at like Madison Square Garden, the media is always like, oh, did you ever think he'd be headlining Madison Square Garden? I bet you Tony Ferguson never thought he'd be headlining in Jacksonville, Florida, of all places, for an interim title fight.
I bet there's probably not a lot of people that thought that they'd be headlining in Jacksonville, Florida, but nonetheless, we still get fights. So looking ahead, the fact that the UFC sent out a press email due to the trio of events. If you go over on Tapology right now, they're showing an extra event on the 23rd. I'm not so sure about that. It might have been just a glitch on their system. But like I said, fight's going to be taking place from the VyStar Veterans Memorial Arena. And it's going to be very interesting to see how that one plays out. The fact that you have to get all the fighters there to Florida. You have to get everybody situated. I know there's still rumors that, and apparently Dana White said on ESPN today that there's still going to be a fight island scheduled for June where they're going to fly fighters in and have lodging and different things set up for them. But
Beach on the beach.
We'll see what happens there. But the fact that we have these 3 cards coming up, like you said, Ferguson Gaethje for the interim lightweight title in the main event, Cejudo and Cruz for the bantamweight strap, and of course with Henry Cejudo as well. We haven't seen Cejudo since last June when he fought Marlon Moraes. So
and coming off a big injury too. So again, I'm a big basketball fan, and there was a guy named Paul George who was almost MVP last season, had double shoulder surgery, came back this season, and it took him a long time to get back into the rhythm of things, and that's kind of what I equate ring rust to. Like, it took him a while to get back into it. Now, I know Dominic Cruz has suffered the same thing, but Dominic Cruz, we've seen him kind of go through that adversity, take a lot of time off, and then come back stronger than ever. And Henry Cejudo, we really haven't seen that from him. He has taken, shorter periods of time off, but I mean, ever since the first DJ fight, he's been extremely active. So it will be really interesting to see kind of how it affects Henry Cejudo compared to how it will Dominic Cruz.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely have to look into that. And the fact that you talked about Dominic Cruz and you see him working with the UFC, you see it, it's kind of weird because you see it with Daniel Cormier as well. And it's been a while since we've seen Cormier. They're still active. They're still in the sport. And with Cruz as well, he has the show with Gilbert Melendez on ESPN. So you know that maybe peak performance Dominic Cruz, that's going to be a thing in the past, but you still have a guy that's at the top of his game, so to speak, in different respects. So hopefully it's not just an absolute blowout. And to answer MMA Pick's question, who's the bantamweight champion in KSW, I would assume you're talking about Antun Rakic. I mean, the last time he fought Damian Stasiak was for the bantamweight championship. Trying to answer your question there. As we roll along, like I said, I mean, UFC 249... was it going to be 249? Were they going to go ahead and call it 250? Another one of the fights that they kind of actually finally formally announced was the fact that we're going to get the rematch between Donald Cerrone and Anthony Pettis. And that was a fight that we've talked about quite a bit. We talked about it in our episode of Significant Strikes from last weekend, was the fact that this is a fight that's 7+ years in the making. We had the first fight where Anthony Pettis, it was just a nice crisp body kick that really winded Donald Cerrone. He landed a couple of shots to the body after that, and then another swift kick, finishing Cowboy. That's a fight that I'm really looking forward to. I mean, this is a great card, but that's a really good fight.
Exactly. Not really a rematch that a lot of people were asking for, but it's one of those fights that you just know when those two guys get together, it's going to be an exciting fight no matter what. I mean, very similar to the main event, Ferguson and Gaethje. That's what I really like about this card. It doesn't just have the name value on it. For a fight card that's kind of been thrown together on short notice, the matchmaking's really good and really well done from top to bottom.
Yeah, so it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. As well, the fact that we have 2 other cards, and we're going to talk about some of the fights on those cards, or at least the fights that we know of as of this point. But you have such a stacked first card. You have 3 cards in 8 days, which a lot of people figured would have to happen because the way that the UFC deal right now is set up with ABC and ESPN, they have to have a certain amount of cards per year. It's over 40, so they're really going to have to start stacking things. And I wouldn't be surprised. We talked about this between you and I. We talked about this as well, and you can check it out on the channel with Early Stoppage, John Franklin. The fact that International Fight Week, throw together a week of fights. You're going to have to do something.
Exactly. Just go Monday through Saturday, take Sunday off, and that'd be the only one. But yeah, I think they really should. And implement a lot more than just the UFC events. I think they should do like a whole Fight Pass week, if you will. Do a Submission Underground. Throw in the other events they show off on Fight Pass, just so it could be really good for the sport as a total, because you'd have so many eyes on it for how great International Fight Week would be. And then if they could kind of scatter in maybe an Invicta card. I know they only fight in Kansas, but still, do something kind of crazy, if you will, like that. Co-promote, but still have it something under the, WME or Fight Pass banner. I think it could be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it'd be really interesting to see how they go ahead with this. Want to thank Full Fist Productions for tuning in. Listen, I mean, a lot of excitement, the fact that we're going to have fights coming up in May, so we got to gear up here in April and get excited about it. Now, in terms of this UFC 249 card, I'm going to rip through some of the fights, and a lot of these fights were already kind of thrown out there. And we have another comment. Pettis stylistically a good matchup for Cowboy. I'm happy. I'm happy as well.
Me too.
Realistically, I mean, the fact that that's going to be possibly a featured prelim and it's on the prelims, you might be disappointed that it's not on the main card. But again, it's just such a stacked card. Hopefully, again, too, the fact that we get Francis Ngannou, Jairzinho Rozenstruik up further on the card. And listen, that's not to slag Jorgen De Castro and Greg Hardy, but it's just the fact that that fight between Ngannou and Rozenstruik could quite possibly be a #1 contenders
100%.
fight. And the last time that I can specifically think of a time that Francis Ngannou fought in a #1 contenders fight, we just watched it here between the two of us, was when he fought Alistair Overeem at UFC 218. So should be a good fight there. Additional bouts on the card per the UFC's official email that they sent out. Ngannou Rozenstruik. You also have Jeremy Stevens, Calvin Kattar, Donald Cerrone, Anthony Pettis, Greg Hardy, De Castro, Oleinik, Verdum. Talk about that one in a second.
Yeah,
Ryan Spann, Sam Alvey's going to be on this card. That's an interesting fight. I think more so for... And it's unfortunate, but Ryan Spann is on a 7-fight win streak. Sam Alvey's lost 3 in a row, if I'm not mistaken. It might be 4.
Might be 4. He's lost a lot by stoppage recently, too, and Ryan Spann's the last guy you want to fight if you've been knocked out recently.
It's been what? It's been over a month, I think, since we made our picks. So yeah, it's been a little bit, but you can go back and check those out. That's some expert analysis. Now there's a little bit of ring rust since we've been out for a little bit.
We're not Dominic Cruz.
Still. You also have Carla Esparza taking on Michelle Watterson. You have Uriah Hall, Jacare Souza. Again, that's a really good one. Vincente Luque in the rematch against Nico Price. And Bryce Mitchell versus Charles Rosa. And Charles Rosa in a couple of different interviews, I know with Mike Heck and JHK MMA. Make sure you follow them, friends of the channel. Charles Rosa wants to take a limb off of Bryce Mitchell.
He's not going to. I'm sorry. Breaking news if you didn't see our 2-minute breakdown. It's going to be the exact opposite. If anything, Bryce Mitchell's going to have one more limb than he entered with.
Go back and watch Charles Rosa and Manny Bermudez. That was an interesting fight in Rosa's return after almost 3 years away from the UFC. So we have a lot of fights coming up. This would not be an episode of This Week in MMA if we didn't get into our favorite segment of the show, which we will. And if this is your first time tuning into This Week in MMA, we always used to pre-record them and it was cool. But now that we're doing it live, it's going to be a lot more fun, Matt. Let's get into the Twitter purge.
It's time for the Twitter purge.
Basically, the point of the Twitter purge is the fact that we are going to skirt across through Twitter, pick out some of the most interesting tweets and different things from social media from this past week. But today, we're just going to focus on the UFC 249, as well as, the 3 cards that we're going to get from Jacksonville, Florida, coming up in early May. So, Matt, the fact that UFC was going to go to Florida, not that it was a foregone conclusion. I know Dana White, when he spoke with Brett Okamoto on ESPN, it was pretty much, everything's going to happen at the Apex, which was not laughable, but it was said in and around that time, the fact that, MMA, sports, everything in Florida, essential service, so to speak. So I was surprised that they didn't just kind of flip script and just say we're going to Florida. But this tweet from, again, our pal Mike Heck that came out 3 days ago, he already knew that it was going to happen in Florida on May 9th. So it was kind of neat. Mike, was on a podcast that I was on for a while with the Loudmouth MMA Podcast Network, but go ahead.
Really interesting, though, that Florida, of course, Florida's the place that considers sports an essential service. Interesting. I hope the event really does go through. I know last time with the event, we all thought 249 was going to go through. I think, though, that the reason that they waited this long and that they are announcing it now finally is that it is, kind of 100%. They are going to have it at this venue. Everything's going to go. It's really odd, though, how commission testing and USADA is going to work, because also by Brett Okamoto, USADA's doing their best to test as many athletes as possible, using the right restrictions, social guidelines with isolation and whatnot. So very interesting to see how they're going to be able to do, medicals and all of those essential services. Very interesting, that's all.
Yeah, it's going to be incredibly interesting, especially with, and we talked about this before, but the fact that you have fighters, you have coaches, and then they have to go to Florida. Who knows how long they're going to be there? I mean, realistically, let's say you're Super Gym. Let's say you're Jackson Wink, and you haven't been able to go to your gym for a month and a half. Now everybody's just going to float on over to Florida. And let's say Mike Winklejohn has, a fighter on week 1, week 2, week 3. He has 10 different fighters fighting on those cards. Does he just stick around in Florida? Do you head back home? There's a lot of weird things that are really going to have to come up and figure themselves out in the next couple of weeks. But I want to give credit where credit's due that Mike had the scoop. Go ahead.
And just aside from that, I am really happy that there will be sports on TV, though. Just there's been such a void of things to do and how to entertain yourself that it will be nice, no matter how you feel about the situation. Maybe you're uncomfortable by it. I think we can all agree that it is going to be nice to actually have something to watch for once.
And seeing Trovolin's comment there, the higher powers of Disney cancel events this time. I mean, the fights aren't happening in Orlando, if that's a saving grace. They're going to happen in the northern, but also still southern Jacksonville, Florida. It's a shame they didn't go to the capital of Tallahassee. Oh, this Florida geography. I'm going crazy. I'm just so excited about the sports. But, going over to the Twitter feed of the day, we're looking at Brett Okamoto's Twitter feed. And listen, he was the guy that really broke the news, that had the conversation today with Dana White, and the fact that the card's going to take place in Jacksonville. Also went through in terms of the broadcast, the fact it's going to be John Anik, Joe Rogan, DC, Megan O'Leary, and Bruce Buffer, which is interesting because, it didn't seem like we were going to get Joe Rogan on the April card. It seemed like it wasn't going to happen at all.
I would have been okay with that.
Well, now all of a sudden we're going to get that. So very interesting there. Like I said, credit where credit's due. Hotel for all the fighters and whatnot. But it's going to be interesting to see, again, like I said, how all of this really kind of fits together. And the fact that we are going to get these cards. And then the next tweet that's up there, UFC reset Smith versus Teixeira for the main event on the 13th. Overeem versus Harris for the 16th. And due to other extenuating circumstances, this fight between Overeem and Harris has been rebooked, it seems, 2 or 3 different times to this point.
Hopefully we do get it. That's a really exciting fight. It's kind of like Ngannou versus Rosenstrike light, though. Because at this point, Overeem's been knocked out just a lot of times, and by those two, of course. Overeem's the guy who you knock out so that you can get into the top 5 at this point in his career, but he is still a really good measuring stick for those guys who are trying to be the elites. I mean, we've talked about it a lot of times. He was doing so well against a guy like Rosenstrike, and then Rosenstrike was able to beat him. He always finds ways to be successful in the majority of his fights. Understandably, he's been knocked out a lot of times. But for the most part, he's going to offer some sort of a test. And for Walt Harris, a guy who he's been through a lot as of late, it'll be interesting to see him kind of come back. And it'll be interesting to see him finally fight a guy who is such a high caliber. Because Walt Harris, for the longest time, hasn't been fighting anyone at Overeem's level. I mean, wins over guys like Oleinik are nice, but Oleinik isn't a guy like Overeem who can really get you to the elite of the division.
And for Walt Harris, when he got the win over Oleinik, it was kind of a stepping stone at the time. Yeah. Now, we look at this card that's coming up, the UFC 249 card. If you're Fabrizio Verdum and you come in off of such a layoff and you beat Oleinik, it's more of a springboard than a stepping stone, and you're right up there at the top of the division, I would think, or you're close to it.
I think coming off a USADA suspension, it's hard to get a title shot off one fight unless
TJ Dillashaw might get one automatically.
Unless your name's either TJ Dillashaw or Brock Lesnar. That's all. I don't know if he's a big enough name either for them to be like, oh, Verdum, you can fight Stipe again, because we've already seen that fight once the first time we saw that fight, the cards were so stacked in Verdum's favor, and the fight didn't even go 2 minutes. So I don't see them, rushing to make that rematch anytime soon.
Yeah, so we'll get into the comments. I mean, MMA picks saying you were angry when Cruz got a belt, and then heard the other option would have been Frankie Edgar, then you're okay with Cruz. Yeah, I mean, Frankie Edgar's last fight was a terrible knockout of the Korean Zombie that happened not that long ago in a different weight class. But again, Jose Aldo was supposed to get the fight off of 2 losses. Yeah. So it's bizarro world, really, where we're at right now. Josh talks UFC. Cruz is going to win. Then Cruz and Piotr Jan. Jan will probably win. Cruz will retire as the GOAT of the division. I already think Dominic Cruz is the GOAT at 135.
I do too, but I think if he beats Henry Cejudo, that's it for him. If he's held out this long for such a good opportunity, and I'm assuming that's why he's been waiting out for, especially like the last year and a half probably, just waiting for that really good opportunity to just rush and get a title shot. Because let's say he does come in off another huge layoff, beats the triples champ, I guess double champ though, and that would be such a storybook ending to his career. It'd be really nice, but I do think he beats Cejudo.
So we'll hop back over to the main screen for a second and really try and dissect this card, because we do have a really good one coming up. So we'll get into the comments as well, and the fact that Josh talks UFC saying, I really hope we get to see Edmund Shabazian soon. So also saying Shabazian versus Derek Brunson. Great fight there. I mean, realistically, and kind of a wonky one, because if you had asked me, maybe a year ago, Edmund Shabazian, Derek Brunson, again, I would have said it's too soon. We don't really know what to expect, especially the fight with Edmund Shabazian and Darren Stewart. We've really, really hammered that one home. So go back and watch that one. But the fact that Shabazian's been able to progress as well as he has since that fight, really telling that he definitely deserves a fight against one of those top flight guys in a Derek Brunson or whoever in and around that.
It's a very similar fight to Derek Brunson versus Ian Heinisch, which happened about a year ago. It's that rising star who we think has a lot of potential, and Derek Brunson just kind of the notorious gatekeeper. I mean, Robert Whittaker beat him, then beat Jacare, then got a title shot. Yoel Romero beat him on his way up. Just a lot of guys beat him on their way up, and then they get into that sort of elite. And his chin's a little suspect. Derek Brunson's really good. He's a great fighter. He's a really good talent. But when you do hit him clean, he tends to go down. And Edmund Shabazian, what he showed the Brad Tavares fight is he definitely has enough power to knock out a guy like Derek Brunson. So I think it's perfect matchmaking. I think it's going to be a really exciting fight. Because again, Derek Brunson's going to offer Edmund Shabazian a lot of roadblocks and a lot of different questions that it will be interesting if you can solve them.
Yeah, and another interesting thing, and I know you mentioned up there in the comments, it was from Trovelin again. Walt Harris is a monster, given Overeem's suspect chin. He's a savvy vet, so very interesting. And it's really weird because Alistair Overeem's super, super long in the tooth. If you take into account the amount of kickboxing and MMA fights he's had, he's one of those guys like in the Paul Daly category that it's insane that they've had this many fights. But Walt Harris, 36 years old. I mean, it's kind of crazy to think. And his record, too, 13-7 with 1 no contest.
He hasn't taken that much damage, just compared to Overeem, but that's like, I don't know. That's like saying a piece of dynamite is not bad compared to a nuke because it's just that other thing's so extreme. Overeem's taking a lot of damage. It's a great point. But here's the thing. We know what Overeem can do if he's not standing for the last 30 seconds of a fight. He can take you down. He's a really good grappler. I can guarantee you he's a better grappler than Walt Harris. But the big question mark is, can Walt Harris really land one punch? Because I really do think that's all he needs against Overeem at this point in Overeem's career. I think he can land it, but no, it will be an interesting fight.
Brandon Duval, good to see you. So hyped to hear this news. Listen, we're excited and excited to be in the same room. Well, I am. Maybe Matt isn't, but excited to be in the same room. I mean, it's a little bit better than Zoom or Skype. And, I mean, very winnable fight for Golden Boy. Just a stylistic matchup. Calvin Kattar versus Jeremy Stephens. Great possible fight of the night. I think so, too. I mean, we talked about it, and the video dropped today about best pure boxers in MMA, and we kind of went through it. And I know a lot of people, I saw this one on Reddit here in the last couple of days. It was how good and crisp Shane Burgos' boxing is. And it was his body strikes against Calvin Kattar. And I wanted to be that guy to say, Calvin Kattar won that fight because his boxing was better. But both of those guys on a really high trajectory. And I think if you look at the two of them, some of the better boxing that we see in MMA, some really effective combinations, good use of distance. And again, this was something that we just covered in one of our videos. So if you get the chance, make sure you check it out. Josh Talks UFC saying, do you think if Cowboy loses it, it's time to hang up the gloves? We said a while ago.
I think he will. I finally do. I'm finally on board with if Cowboy loses one more, it's going to be it. Because him and Pettis have a really good relationship. I know Cowboy's talked about it in the past. He's like, it was really weird fighting Anthony just because, like, we're friends and I've trained with Rufus before. So I think that they did this fight because if he loses, there's not going to be any animosity towards the guy who he's fighting. It's going to be kind of, a feel-good Cowboy fight. Like, they're going to high-five and have fun. And it should be a really entertaining fight. So if he does lose to a guy like Anthony Pettis, I don't think he would mind retiring off a loss like that.
And Josh Talks MMA and MMA picks going back and forth and saying if Pettis loses, he should look at going into a different promotion. We kind of covered this in Significant Strikes for UFC 249. But I really do think Anthony Pettis, Sergio Pettis, and Bellator, I mean, that's pretty good.
And Anthony Pettis is still fairly young. I know he's taken a lot of damage in his career, and there's a lot of good matchups for him over in Bellator. I'm not saying he'd win all of them, but like Benson Henderson's one of the top lightweights over in Bellator, and Anthony Pettis has done notoriously well against him. So
Anthony Pettis against Benson Henderson, Michael Chandler, Brandon Gertz. There's a lot of different names.
Like anybody, really. I would watch Anthony Pettis fight anybody, really, just because of his style. I think he's more likely, though. I don't think Pettis retires after. I think Pettis is more likely to get caught. I do think if Cowboy retires.
Roger Huerta?
Yeah, and especially by stoppage, too. If Cowboy gets stopped another time, I would just want him to retire at this point.
Yeah, so I mean, UFC 249, like I said, coming up May 9th. We've got the other cards proposed coming up. We've got, like I said, going through this card for 249, Ryan Spence, Sam Alvey at 205, Charles Rosa, and Bryce Mitchell. I know the fact that Josh Talks brings it up, the fact that OSP is going up to heavyweight, that's really interesting because to me, OSP at 205 seems like the perfect kind of wonky guy. He is a big guy and a tall guy at that too. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. That's one of those fights that's kind of rumored and been talked about. If I'm not mistaken, that's on the third card. Could be on the 13th. It's on the 13th against Ben Rothwell.
An odd fight.
That's a really odd fight, just based on the fact that OSP, really long guy, and he can work different things at 205 that I don't know if he'll be able to at 265. Like some of those weird, like when he fought Tyson Pedro and the weird arm lock, key lock type of submission that he had. Like, I don't know how well that's all going to work in the grappling against some of those bigger guys, but we'll see.
I think he's so much more athletic than 90% of the guys in the division. That's the one thing OSP has going for him. I mean, he played, he was a linebacker. I'm not exactly sure what position he was, but he played university football. And you know that guys like that are absurdly high-level athletes. And the size of him, too. He is a big guy, so I feel like he must cut a lot of weight to make that 205 weight class. Ben Rothwell's a weird guy to throw him in with, though, because Ben Rothwell's as big of a heavyweight as you can get. So it's really weird that that would be the first fight that you give a former light heavyweight to. But I think it could be exciting. I think OSP is better than Ben Rothwell at a lot of things at this stage in his career. It's just really going to come down to how much Ben Rothwell's size will affect him.
Yeah, I mean, maybe he'll get OSP and Ilir Latifi at 265.
A rematch.
Yeah, a rematch. That'd be a lot of fun to see. But there's all sorts of fights to make up. And again, it'll be really interesting to see how this all shakes out with the other cards that we're going to get from Florida, because you've got cards that quick coming together. It'll the news is going to be breaking all the time, knock on wood.
Yeah.
And hopefully these cards actually happen. But again, we've got all the picks here with Fight Night picks for UFC 249. I know we might have to, move and change some of them, pepper in some more picks. You're going to see a lot more of us here on the channel as well. We've got a lot of different things popping off. I know MMA picks in the chat. Do you think Volkanovski is the most underrated champion in the UFC?
No.
I think he's gotten his due just based on the fact that he beat a big star in Max Holloway to get the belt. So I think that's kind of fair.
He's definitely underrated, but I don't know if Henry Cejudo has any fans, but he's a legitimate champ who beat probably the GOAT of MMA and then one of the more dangerous knockout artists, a weight class above where he naturally is. And whether you like his gimmick or not, Henry Cejudo can't be denied how skilled he is, so he would be my most underrated.
And I think, based on hype and star power, maybe Volkanovski is, and if you really want to become a hipster, I would say that Valentina Shevchenko is probably the most underrated champion.
The level of competition.
Next one, Rothwell hasn't been the same since return from the suspension.
Hasn't.
No. The fight against Blagoy Ivanov was weird. And then he beat Stefan Struve.
And then Arlovsky hit him 400 times.
And the
Struve
Struve fight was incredibly controversial. Poor Stefan Struve.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see what Ben Rothwell we get. And again, the fact that Ben Rothwell right now, the way that he's been fighting is just move forward, take a ton of damage, and throw a jab. And that's pretty much been Ben Rothwell's MO. So if you're OSP, you can try and take him down. It's going to be difficult because he's such a big guy. But use your length, and he's one of the best at doing that.
Oh, yeah.
And he can work off of both
I was
stances,
just saying, if he
too.
head kicks Ben Rothwell, that'd be pretty cool. Like, that would be, like, the best way that fight could end.
You want to talk underrated? I know OSP fought for an interim championship against John Jones, but
If
man,
you say Oven St. Prue's underrated.
OSP is one wonky fighter. And he's one of the guys that I would definitely not want to fight. I would take a fight against Gokhan Saki before I took a fight against
I would
Oven
hope
St.
so.
Prue. Next one from Josh Chalk's UFC. Have you guys heard anything about Yair? We've heard nothing about him for months now. Yair versus Zabit in the future.
I mean, last time I talked to... no, I'm kidding. I have no idea. I want to see him fight that Zabit fight. Sorry if I was taking what you were about to say. I really want that fight to happen. I don't think it will be the next fight that they do. I agree, Zabit needs a 5-rounder. I think he needs a 5-rounder before he even fights Yair, because Yair has 5-round experience. With Zombie, he's trained for 5
experience at
round
altitude, too.
Exactly. And that's when you know. For instance, Yair Rodriguez won the Ultimate Fighter in Mexico City at altitude, which is almost equal to Denver, if not higher, I believe. So he's able to go 3 hard rounds, 5 hard rounds. When I say hard, I mean like fight of the night caliber fights at altitude. Zabit gets tired at sea level in, I'd say 3 rounds, but it's only like a round and a half. So I think he does need to join that 5-round club before you can get him in with a guy like, Korean Zombie, Max Holloway, guys like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like New Jersey's known for their mountains, whereas it has a beat station with
true.
Mark Henry and crew, and Frankie Edgar, who's a name that popped up here recently. So yeah, I would agree with you there. And in terms of Yair Rodriguez and Zabit Magomed-Sharipov, if you asked me 9 months ago, 6 months ago, if I wanted to see that fight happen, for just overall excitement, I would have, but it just didn't make sense. But I think the fact that Yair Rodriguez beating Jeremy Stevens, whereas Zabit was able to get the win over Calvin Kattar, even though it was a 3-rounder, and he started to kind of dive bomb near the end, I think it'd be very interesting if we could get that. MMA picks saying, what do you think about strawweight? Men's strawweight, it's something that you can find in other promotions.
There's atomweight boxing that I don't mind, and they're 118 pounds. That's really my only argument against it. I mean, they are small. I'm a pretty thin person, but I would still tower over anyone who could make 125 comfortably.
115.
115, sorry.
Yeah, I don't know if that'll happen. And yeah, if Calvin Kattar and Zabit,
I think so too.
If ifs and buts were candy and nuts, we'd all have a Merry Christmas. But yeah, I wish that was a 5-round.
Bit of a hot take. I thought you could have given the Zabit Stevens decision to Stevens. I mean, it was a split decision. It was a really close fight. A lot of people did think Zabit won the first 2. I thought Stevens won that fight. It wasn't so outrageous, though. It was pretty much a draw, so you can give it to either guy. But that's what I mean. He's really good. He's really flashy. But those kicks don't land. All he's doing is jumping and spinning around. And Joe Rogan goes crazy. And then the legend of Zabit keeps on growing. So I think he does need a proven top-tier featherweight in a 5-round atmosphere until I hop on that train.
I mean, Sulev stretches are cool, but I mean,
Doing it against Brandon Davis is a little bit different than, knocking out the Korean Zombie. There's levels to this, and I just don't know if Zabit's on that level because he hasn't really fought anyone on that level.
yeah, so it'll be interesting to see what happens at 145 pounds. I mean, as everybody watching knows, it's one of the most dynamic divisions that we have right now. Even 135 heating up, especially the fact that Dominic Cruz back in the mix, and you might want to tell me that, hey, that's going to hold up the division, and you're not wrong, but it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. I know I saw it out there. It was social media. It was Reddit. It was this. It was that. The fact that Michael Bisping becoming champion over Luke Rockhold was the worst thing that ever happened for the middleweight division. It held it up for a long time.
Not if you're me, though. If you're me, you yelled really, really loud.
It did hold it up for a really long time. But then finally you had Dan Henderson, then a lot of time off. And then you got GSP, who after 30 days or 34 days, I think it was, vacated the belt. So at least you had that. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens at 35. And the other thing I want to say, too, while we're on the topic, Henry Cejudo and Dominic Cruz, like, you might scoff at it, and the fact that Dominic Cruz hasn't fought in almost 4 years, like 3.5 years, and it was on a loss to Cody Garbrandt where he got styled. But it's still, if you had a prime guy, it's a really dynamic fight. It's one that, stylistically, it's fun.
At this point, I think we can all agree. I would watch Henry Cejudo fight anybody for at least $25 on a pay-per-view. That's how starved I am for MMA.
But only 25.
Only
not
25.
$59.99.
Not $59. Not just for Henry Cejudo. But Dominic Cruz, he's everyone's favorite bantamweight ever. There's nothing to really dislike about him unless you dislike his commentary, and some people do. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I think the back and forth will be fun. I don't know how much media they will be able to do and how the press conferences are going to work.
I still go back on YouTube and watch Dominic Cruz and Cody Garbrandt verbally spar.
Like, that's what I mean. I know Cody won that fight, but it was 10-8 round after 10-8 round between those two intellectually when they were talking back and forth. It was very embarrassing for Cody Garbrandt. I think Henry Cejudo is much more well-read than Cody Garbrandt, but I still think Cruz is going to get off some pretty quotable lines.
And I doubt that Henry Cejudo's ever had to chase cats around in his life.
I don't know either.
We'll go with that one. Josh Talks MMA, Brandon Moreno, Devison Figueiredo for the flyweight title. That's a fight that you want to see. Listen, Josh Talks UFC. I think you're slowly becoming the biggest Fight Night Picks fan, and you're reading our minds because
we agree 100%.
That's a fight I'd like to see, and I think that the Assassin Baby, I said it in 2019, he's your UFC flyweight champ at some point this year. Now we're getting fights back, so who knows? Maybe a fight happens sooner rather than later. Another comment, what's the thoughts on a possible 165-pound division? A lot of people are against it. I don't know where I'm at anymore.
I don't think we need it. People are going to cut an extreme amount of weight no matter what. And I think we've seen now with guys like, Robert Whittaker, Darren Till,
Michael Chiesa,
moving up in weight for a lot of guys, the best thing they could ever do. And Manny Bermudez. And more people are starting to do it. So the more commonplace it becomes, I think we're going to have a lot less problems with weight cutting. And honestly, the only time people care about weight cutting is when someone in a main event might miss weight. No one talks about it if it's a guy in the prelims missing weight. So it's really weird how people kind of choose when they want to care about extreme weight cutting and when they don't want to. I know Craig doesn't agree with what I'm saying right now, but unless Kevin Lee has a fight night coming up, people don't care about weight cutting at nearly as big of a scale.
Ray Borg beat Rogerio Bontorin recently. Weighed in at 128 pounds. Bontorin made the exact weight limit. Fasted the entire week to make the weight, and then was incredibly thin, drawn out when he goes to fight. Ray Borg did Ray Borg, which is fair, and out-wrestled him, outpointed him, won the fight. And then Ray Borg had a fight booked for 135 coming up this spring into the summer. And listen, it was a good fight for Ray Borg, but the point is, not a lot of people focused on it, but sometimes it becomes a trend like the Borgs, like the Bermudez's. And then at some point, it's like, hey, we've had enough. For Bermudez, is the fact that he kept missing weight and losing fights.
But Bermudez, people on a larger scale don't know him. That's what I mean. Kevin Lee misses weight every time he main events a fight night or anything, and that's when the conversation starts. That's when guys like Joe Rogan are going to go, oh, well, when is weight cutting going to get fixed in the sport? I think it's a problem, don't get me wrong, but I think it's a problem that over the last, 2.5, about 3 years, it has been starting to go in the right direction. I know one championship has their hydration test that everyone trusts, but I do think weight cutting as a whole has gotten better because more people are moving up a weight class, and we've noticed that too. I mean, more of the bigger names are starting to switch around, and there's more parity in the weight classes. So I'm fine with the weight classes how they are.
And the other thing that gets interesting too when you talk about it, more parity, more people moving up, but you've got fighters like the Chris Weidmans that made the experiment at 205, moving back to 185. Jacare Souza, there's always been talk of Yoel Romero moving up to 205. Luke Rockhold did it. And Anthony Smith and Thiago Santos did it to great avail. I mean, they ended up with title shots just by moving up and getting into a bit more of a shallow division. So it'll be interesting to see how it goes moving forward.
Isn't it wild though? You say shallow division, but if Thiago Santos fought Chris Weidman right now, who do you think wins? I think Thiago Santos might end a man's life. That's how one-sided that fight could be.
And I thought that Kelvin Gastelum was going to beat Chris Weidman back in 2017. The other thing that was brought up, and I think it's a really good point too, do you think that weighing in on the day of the fight in some categories could be dead? I think that you should. I know that you do if you're in California. There's a weight tolerance, and if you weigh over a certain percentage, then you're not allowed to fight in your division anymore unless you get cleared by a doctor. And you bring up Grant Dawson missing weight by 4 pounds. I know Drew Dober was a guy that missed weight, and then he had to go visit a doctor to see if he could cut weight safely to still stay at 155 pounds. And the last time I checked, he beat Nasrat Hakparas quite handily, and he's really skyrocketed himself in that division.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, it's a really interesting type of thing, and there's no magic solution, because if there was, then somebody already would have implemented it.
I think if you miss weight, you have to do at least your next 2 fights the weight class up. If you can then get clearance like a like a Drew Dober, I think you do have to do that next step deeper. I don't think you can just go, oh, what was my bad? Maybe have 1 fight up, lose, and then move right back down, especially if you're missing weight consistently. And Kelvin Gastelum, for instance, was like that. They made him fight at 185. He made weight at 185, beat the brakes off Nate Marquardt. That was a pretty sad fight. Went back down, had more weight problems, and then they were like, okay, you just can't fight here anymore. So they forced him to move up. I don't see why they don't do that with more athletes. And I know Kelvin Gastelum's a much bigger name than a guy like Grant Dawson, but I think that the same treatment has to trickle down to the prelim fighters the same that it does for the main card guy.
And Josh Talks UFC, all the questions and comments are great. The last one that you just threw out there, do you think we'll get a press conference online or something for this event? Would you like to see it? Or some fighters on a live stream promoting it, or Dana and some fighters going on ESPN Thoughts? I want to bring something up here. There is not going to be a ton of transparency. There's going to be a lot of hate for MMA media, and it's totally unjust, and it's ridiculous. Because people are just doing their jobs. Like, there's leaks and things in the NFL, baseball, NBA, regular news, and nobody freaks out at the media about it, because that's their job. But in MMA, it's totally different. There's a lot of undue hate, and I don't like it. And I like this.
Adrian Wojnarowski knows things before the athletes know things in basketball, and everyone just acts like it's normal. If Ariel Helwani says there's a match-making, issue, or there's a fight being booked like 3 months in advance, people get mad. It doesn't make any sense.
No, but to answer that, I think they're going to do as much as they can to promote this, just based on the fact that, like you said, it's on ESPN. There's going to be Dominic Cruz is going to go on ESPN. Henry Cejudo is going to go on. Your 2 main eventers are going to go on. Hopefully they do what they did with Conor McGregor and Nate Diaz for 196, and they have them next to each other and go on every
have fun like
single
the Money
show.
Channel, have a lot of fun.
Exactly. Like so hopefully that's something that we get, because realistically, let's say you're the biggest MMA fan in the world, or you're the most casual MMA fan in the world. Maybe you're a bigger fan of Frank Shamrock than you are Ken Shamrock. Or probably the only fighter that you know is Conor McGregor. You're going to want more and more of this kind of stuff on those mainstream networks, because growing the sport is the best thing that can happen. It's just like we said for UFC 246. The best thing you can have is Conor McGregor everywhere, and plastered everywhere, because it grows the sport and you get more and more people involved. So to really throw that in there, Trovelin saying, I often like to play matchmaker. How do you think KG versus Cannonier match up? Because I think it'd be freaking epic. When I read that, I thought Kevin Garnett against Jared Cannonier. That's ridiculous.
In basketball, Kevin Garnett's probably got his number.
But Kelvin Gastelum, Jared Cannonier, you want a nice striker's paradise? Paradise? They're just gonna punch and punch and punch.
They definitely will. Kelvin Gastelum boxes him up though. Jared Cannonier hits really, really hard.
Bigger guy.
Oh, yeah, he's definitely bigger. But the problem is, the way Jared Cannonier wins fights is he's a very big, powerful guy. That's how he wins fights. And he's fighting guys who are good at wrestling, but okay at striking. He's fighting very well-rounded guys. And when you're a striker at his caliber, you're going to be able to knock a lot of them out. But then you're going to meet a guy like Kelvin Gastelum, who has the power and way more speed than you have. But his technique is pretty much perfect. I mean, Kelvin Gastelum's pure boxing is absurd. So much so that we put him in our list for best pure boxers in all of MMA. And if you're throwing those big looping shots of Jared Cannonier trying to hit someone like Kelvin Gastelum, I think the head movement in the box would be way too much.
It's going to be really interesting, too, if that fight were to happen, because with Kelvin Gastelum, you know, the fight against Adesanya, that was a close fight.
It was.
And it was a heck of a fight. And then the fight against Darren Till was...
It was all
They
right.
were both tentative. Really, they were. And Darren Till testing out the waters against a guy that's fought for an interim belt very, very recently.
Till had good moments.
And he did, too. So, really, springboard for Till at the time. And if you look at Kelvin Gastelum, all right, back to the drawing board. But you know you're still one of the elite guys in the division. And you're still going to get a fresh Kelvin Gastelum the next one. You're talking dream fights, Korean Zombie against Volkanovski, Stipe versus John Jones, Daniel Cormier versus John Jones at heavyweight, maybe. And another one, Adesanya versus Jones. I personally don't like that one. I don't want to see that happen. I think it's huge.
Yeah.
It'd be huge for the sport. That's the best opportunity to put two marketable guys out there. It's crazy to say that about John Jones in the spring of 2020.
John Jones's feelings would be so hurt after one of those press conferences because, like, Daniel Cormier is going to say some things, but this is why we all love Daniel Cormier. He's kind of just a regular guy, and he's going to draw the line at a certain point. He will make certain comments because they're such heated rivals, but he will reserve himself because he's just a genuinely really nice person. I'm sure Israel Adesanya is too, but he's not going to, take the same precautions in hyping that fight. So I think that could get very ugly very fast.
So it'll be interesting to see what we get there. And I mean, realistically, appreciate everybody for tuning in. MMA picks, Trovelin, Josh Talks UFC. Who else have we had up here? Let's give shouts where shouts are due. We're going up through. There were a ton of comments.
There
so
was
we
a lot.
appreciate
We
that.
had a lot.
Brandon Duvall.
Thank you.
And Full Fist Productions. Really want to thank everybody for tuning in, hitting us up with the comments. I mean, like we say, it's the best part of every live show for us is to answer all the questions over there. So make sure you keep following up with that. Matt, we just started a new series, FNP Selects. What are we about there?
So basically, if you've ever watched Watch Mojo, for instance, they'll do top 10 best blank. And we thought, what if we could do that, but make it way more specific for MMA, but make it very more, exclusive. So we only do our either top 2 or top 3, depending on the subject. What have we done? We've done top best walkouts.
I want to
We've
say
done best
this.
boxing.
I write for MMA on Point,
That's
so
true.
there's that, but it's different from their videos. We're going a lot more in depth because with MMA on Point, you get 10 different picks in a 10-minute slot. It's really quick, so we get the chance to flesh out our ideas and talk quite a bit on the subject. But, I mean, listen, everybody tuning in. Appreciate that, too. But, yeah, I mean, we've had Best Pure Boxer that came out today. We had Best Walkouts that came out today. Yesterday, we had a really good one with Under the Radar Fighters. I know in the thumbnail, I threw out Leonardo Santos with Claudio Silva in there. A lot of other fighters that just maybe you don't see them a lot due to injury, layoff, whatever.
And if you guys have any lists that you would like us to, go over, review, give you our opinion, feel free to. We still need more things to talk about, so fan questions are always a good way to do it.
Yeah, so really appreciate that. As always, you can find us on Twitter and Instagram at Craig Allen FNP, at Matt Allen FNP, at Fight Night Picks as well. And yeah, we got a lot of stuff coming out. We got more videos coming out tomorrow and in the next few days. So make sure you check those out. As always, we really appreciate everybody tuning in. And yeah, we'll be back sooner than ever because we're actually in the same spot and have a lot to talk about. So appreciate that, and we will catch everybody shortly, soon. See you later.
Ladies and gentlemen, recorded in Fredericton, New Brunswick, Canada, it's time for the Fight Night Picks podcast with your host, Craig
And Matt.